Good morning, Mark. How are you?
David.
Nice to
Thanks
be
for
here.
bringing the portfolio of work over.
It's my pleasure. I just thought I might start with you as a progression of painting here.
Well, I notice here in the first panel, this is obviously the infant stage of developing a watercolour.
Very much so. I mean, I've used just one simple colour, which is cobalt blue, which could actually be washed out too easily. But see, particularly I've left white here and white here. The figures won't be the same in these three because they've been very loosely laid in. The composition is the same, however. So that's the beginning.
I notice here, David, there's, unlike a lot of other people, there's no pencil marks or drawing marks as a gauge, as a composition.
Well, I maybe have some strange ideas about how I put the watercolour together. I always feel that if I pencil it all in first and then sort of more or less colour it in, it all becomes very static for me. So the only thing I've done here is pencil in the beginning of what will be the clock in this, which is actually Central Station in Sydney. And maybe where the end of the buildings may happen. But all that may change as you see the progression.
Well, that just shows you your confidence. Unlike other people who perhaps don't have the same confidence. Here we are on panel 2.
Well, that's
We've
right.
seen a huge change from the blue base to this.
Well, all I've done really is use one other colour, which is burnt umber, and used it very washed out here so that you have some depth still. Just a suggestion of what's happening at the station. Now, if you know the station, everybody does, and everybody knows the clock within Sydney. The roof is not quite the same, but I only needed a suggestion. The white is left there because of the clock. The white was left over here because this guy's going to be reading a newspaper. And this guy's already started to be washed out of the blue, so you can see I can lift the blue.
Right. And now we come on to the final panel.
Well,
which again
finally,
is
yes, which has taken me about
huge.
another half an hour.
Right.
A colour has been put in, as you can see. This guy is now reading his newspaper. The clock has now got shadow, looking more realistic, and all the detail has been taken down. A couple of lights put in for reflection up there, and a little bit of colour over here to give it a lift. Basically, it's 3 colours, this painting.
So one of the observations I noticed with watercolour is that white base is the underneath paper base, and you've got to work always in reverse. You've got to sort of think, where's the highlight going
Here
to be?
it's rather like,
start?
as you can see, I've travelled all this down and really laid it all back so it doesn't stand out. If I lose the lights, you're quite right. If I lose the white of the paper, and I'm almost painting in the negative, it's gone. Yeah. Because if I start back into it, I'm into deep mud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. David, this next painting of the horses in race, I just love the way you capture the action. Do you have some affinity to the subject, and that's why this will come about?
No. I don't. I've only been to 2 country horse racing. That's what I know, and they're not particularly my bag. But a lot of it is actually it's pretty abstract. And instead of just side-on horses, head-on horses, and whatever, I thought, well, let's just do them from back view to be able to give the painting far more interest, because, as was mentioned when this was at the Royal Art Society not so very long ago, and Guy mentioned that you could almost feel the mud hitting you in the mouth. So
True.
As long as there's movement and as long as there's a bit of colour in it, and as you can see, don't count the horse's legs because there are about 4 more than there should be. However, as a painting, let's hope it works. It's the subject matter and the way it's been painted, I suppose, that makes it a little more interesting.
David, a lot of the subject matter you choose to paint is you're acting as an observer. We call this a theme we've chosen to call as insightful observation. But there's the traditional side of your observation, and then there's the less traditional and sometimes the quite whimsical. And one of the recent paintings you brought in, which is this surprise one here, I absolutely love. I think you've captured the moment. I love the shape. I like the body language, so to speak.
I mean,
run us through this. Where did the idea come from?
Interesting that you should say that. I paint with a variety of subjects because it keeps my interest up rather than anything else. I mean, I just don't paint landscapes, seascapes, or whatever. I take all of this out of my sketchbooks mainly, which may be sort of 4 or 5 years old, and I probably got about 100 and more of those sketchbooks. So I can look at them and go through them and whatever. This actually came from a steam room. It's this 2 women in a steam room having a gossip. And it was a place in Sydney, and there was a women's department and there was a men's department. It was just like a sauna, and you could peer in a window, and I just caught this glimpse. And I thought, oh, there's a subject in there. And then the rest is, of course, from memory. It was just difficult for me to remember them and to put it into the fact that they are going to have a bit of gossip and just leave it. So there it is.
You've got the classical body language there.
I think they may be sometimes a bit worried, I'm not quite sure. But I mean, that's what it was like, that's how it is. It's really just a little charming piece, I suppose.
David, the area we're looking at on this painting is just one of the beautiful feathering techniques of watercolour, which is unique, and the way you've used it is just shows the professionalism you have. How do you capture that effect on this action-packed painting that we're going to see, the excitement that you've got and that detailing that you've got with the texture?
Well, you have to know the paints. There are several sort of sedimentary colours, there's the staining colours, and there's the transparent colours. If you use the sedimentary colours, it will go into the grain of the paper and it will leave you this sort of sedimentary sort of colour here, you see. And you've got to remember what you're going to use, because coming down here, it gets lighter and going into transparent colours. So, because there are three properties mainly in watercolour, transparent, staining and sedimentary, find out what they are and use them to the best advantage. Sometimes it's best not to go into something and think, oh, God, is this working? And then you go back later and say, wow, maybe it has worked. Often, painting in puddles and leaving it, the watercolour does its own work.
That's so true.
This was Belongil Beach near Byron Bay, and I lived there for 2 years near Byron Bay, and used to go down. Not only used to have horse exercises every Saturday morning or whatever, it was a great place for kite flying, and that's just one of those things that was captured at some time. I have many drawings of this, but there we go. The kites are actually coming towards you, and if you look, this is just pencil, but as it goes up into the kite is actually coming up this way towards you. So if they were any smaller, the painting wouldn't have worked. At least, I hope, without too much detail, these guys have got a bit of action. It's refreshing, and I can smell the sea.